and welcome back to Reactivity TV. I'm Amy Albero, and I'm a licensed therapist. And we're here today with a bonus episode all about Love is Blind, episodes 1 through 3.
I am Chris. I'm not a licensed therapist, but what I am is a guy who's been married now for 11 and a half years, and has thought long and hard about love and about what it is. And I want to talk about that, and this seems like a good show to opine on.
Including these first 3 episodes?
I mean, I got lots to talk about, but we've only seen 3 episodes, so I'll see what I can jam into just the first 3.
Okay.
So in this first episode, we're only covering episodes 1 through 3. We'll be back for episodes 4 through 6, and then however they release them later in the season. We're not going to talk about all the individuals. There's a lot of cast members. As I mentioned at the top, this is the largest season ever, and there are just so many people to get through. We're just going to talk about what we find to be the most notable or the most interesting individuals / couples / triangles / we even have a quad going on right now. So hang tight for the remainder of it, and for more context on some of those other people, if they seem to get more noteworthy and interesting as the episodes go on.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right, so let's get to a couple of opening thoughts. Macro level, not necessarily on the individuals. First blush, what are you feeling about this?
I mean, honestly, it's very long.
It's really long. 6 episodes in the pods. Are you kidding me?
This is the longest time we've spent in the pods. And for me, the pods is like the least interesting, especially like trying to cover it in a way like this. It's also like the most challenging. But the first episode was a little bit of a slog for me. But as we got into it a little bit more, and I became a little bit more understanding of who's who of the many varied cast, I'm intrigued. You know, I feel like we haven't had love triangles in a while. We haven't necessarily had this kind of drama. So I'm interested in the dynamics. I don't know how interested I am or invested I am in any of the individuals, and we'll get into that. How about you?
I think you've nailed it. This is probably the least likable cast I've ever seen. There's exactly one person that I find interesting or that I'm really rooting for. And not only am I not rooting for most of the others, but I'm actively rooting against their interests because I just find them to be so unlikable. I think one of the other major takeaways, for those who have followed our channel with some of the Bachelor series stuff, we constantly hit on the most important thing is shared values, you know, and the conversations that we are having are unserious and not focused on understanding what the values are of the people, in the pod across from you. So I just find, I find myself getting really frustrated when they're on these dates and talking about their favorite Halloween costumes instead of talking about, you know, more fruitful topics, like, you know, tell me about your upbringing. Right.
Yeah.
And the other, you know, notable thing for me is first 3 episodes, they are going hard at religion. My
that's
God,
very, notable.
Very anti-religion agenda going on here to the point where it's kind of like, guys, come on now, you know, you're turning off a huge section of your audience.
And we're not particularly religious. We're saying that, like, it's like, okay, there's a message.
There's a message that you want us to know. Yeah. So, all right. So let's just start off. We're going to do kind of just briefly talk about the noteworthy individuals, and then we'll get into the couples or the quads and triangles that they're involved in after that, right?
Yes.
So we picked out 7
individuals.
7 individuals. It's 3 men, 4 women. So let's start with the men, shall we?
Okay.
All right. So let's go with Dave as the first one, because I think he probably gets the most screen time of any of the men.
I don't know. It feels like that. Although Mason got quite a bit as we got into episode 3.
Feels like Mason sort of like they were trying to catch him up in episode 3. So give us a little background. What do we know about Dave?
So Dave is 32. He has worked in medical aesthetics, which he said has affected him in terms of what a woman should look like. He currently owns his own business and aspires to own many businesses. He was a little shaky on what his business actually is.
You call it shaky. I call it cagey, but okay. Yeah.
I own a medical distributing thing is what he said as what his business is. And he basically said it's because I don't like to answer to anybody, which is a flag.
Well, why to be an entrepreneur? Yeah.
Sure. But he also referenced that he was kind of a typical white dude growing up, went to Catholic school, His mom passed away 6 years ago, stage 4 breast cancer, but survived 10 and a half years
Very impressive.
post that diagnosis. And she really inspired his integrity and doing the right thing. And he had kind of acknowledged that in having integrity wasn't always the way that he lived. And he references later on that he's, cheated on someone in the past. But he's also acknowledged that he's been an ass to women in previous dating life. Those are his words, and that he's been shallow. So he gives us a lot up front about who he is. And he's giving us exactly who we're meeting too.
Yeah. Spoiler: he's still an ass to women.
Yeah. Great.
Look, I think that this guy is a great casting job for a reality TV show. I would never cast him as somebody's husband at this moment in time. He's basically an asshole. He walks into most of these first date introductions and just throws out some really, really heinous might be a strong word, but some really shots that are just like, you're testing these women to see if you can basically beat on them is effectively what
his
you're doing.
For opening question is, what's wrong with you?
Yes, yeah. I mean, there was
He also has told a number of the women that he has an OnlyFans account, and then kind of tests their reaction and then says, just kidding. Like he's messing with them.
Yes.
He also tends to lead with sex and sexuality in his conversations. And so I don't know how much he is matured, but one of the things that you were saying in kind of your opening thoughts were about these unserious conversations. And Dave is one of several that are not very intentional. If they are dating for marriage, they are not doing this very intentionally. And he is a really good example of that we'll talk about.
Yeah, I agree entirely. I find him to be not particularly genuine or believable. And we'll get into it a little bit specifically with his Madison connection.
Sure.
Madison? Madison Molly. I'm sorry, them names.
There's a lot of M's.
A lot of M's in this season. Yeah. That to me, and not to jump too far ahead, I don't think he actually understands what love and marriage is conceptually. But we'll get into that. I agree. So let's move on to Alex, who I think I led off saying that there's only one individual that I root for and I find likable, and that is Alex. He asks the best questions. I think that he is dating with intentionality. I think that he kind of understands what his own values are, and he's asking the right questions to ascertain whether this person is going to fit well into my life. He's a former ugly kid, self-described ugly kid, and so he definitely brings a lot of anxiety and insecurities with that.
Yeah.
But he just is, I think, generally an anxious and a bit fearful. Somebody called him fearful. Madison called him fearful. Yeah. And I agree with that. My problem with Alex is not that I don't like, he's the type of guy that if I had a female friend or a sister looking for a date, I would absolutely set them up with Alex. My problem is, how is his anxiety going to get him through a very tight process, right? I think that he very easily could be one of these guys who ends up at the altar and just can't pull the trigger because it's just too fast a process.
Right.
But he's the only guy I'm hoping even gets to the altar at this moment.
Yeah. I mean, he's giving golden retriever energy, which
not a compliment.
Isn't entirely a compliment, and we'll get to this when we talk about his dynamic with Madison, but there isn't really a lot of sex appeal happening with Alex, but that could also speak to his anxiety. Another just relevant note about Alex and his history is besides kind of being this unattractive kid, he talked about family issues, that he had bad ADHD. His family is all about school and academia, and he failed high school, so he was kicked out of the house. So had to be really independent from a young age. And he also said that kind of growing up in the way that he did and being really bullied, he can sense who isn't being included. And I think that kind of empathy is also, he's probably, a deep empath or maybe even like a more like highly sensitive person. And so I think that is also where some of that anxiety comes from.
Yeah.
But also the intuition and intentionality that he brings with some of these conversations.
Yeah. And I think that his conversations lead us to some of the more interesting conversations that we could have about dating. And we'll get to there. But he makes a couple of interesting observations and asks a couple of really interesting questions that are way beyond what we're seeing other people do in this show. Yep. Shall we move on to Mason?
Yes. So truthfully, I don't have a lot of notes about Mason and his background. All I really know about Mason, please fill in the blanks, is that he was kind of like a skater boy growing up. He also had a difficult experience in high school, but was able to get into college, through which he found film. And he now works in cinematography. We hear him talk about his love of movies. We also know that it's really important to know about someone's Halloween costume. But other than that, I feel like I don't really know him. And he's another person that's very unserious here. And my read is that he also lacks a lot of ability to be vulnerable. He talks about never being the one to break up with someone. And he frames it as, I just never want to give up. And people end up, falling in love with someone else. But I think that's a convenient frame for what might be happening here. But he's not really giving a whole lot. And that's the theme of him in all of these dating pod dynamics.
Yeah. I find him to be another disingenuous and unserious individual. If there's one person on this show that I would just immediately peg as here for clout or here for the wrong reasons, here for the Instagram followers, he's the guy right now, because nothing he's doing seems intentional. Nothing he's doing, it really seems to be, real courtship, right?
Yeah.
And when he's given opportunities, like with Madison later, where she is basically giving him the answers to the test, which, by the way, he does talk about how he got a 6 on an exam once, so we know he's not a great test taker already. But she's giving him the answers.
That wasn't him. That was Dave.
Dave got the 6? Oh, I just assume Mason did too.
No, we have
there
lots
are a
of
lot of idiots on this. Oh my
poor
god,
academics.
Poor. This is Apparently they're going hard at academics in this episode too, because that was Dave was a 6.
Dave was the 6.
Oh my god, there's so many idiots on this show.
But they're all kind of dating each other literally.
Yeah,
and so that conversation, I think. Actually, I don't know. I can't remember who it was.
All right. Well, either way.
He seems disingenuous, and he also seems like he's never been given this kind of attention from a woman before and like doesn't really know how to deal with it. I was saying while we were watching, it's giving nerdy fuckboy kind of vibes. Part of my language, I know you hate when I swear, but I don't know another word to say other than fuckboy here. Is there a non-swear word way? Player, I
guess.
But he's not. He doesn't.
But he's not. He doesn't have.
He's not good at it.
Yeah.
So that's what it's like someone who's trying to be a player, but like fails.
Doesn't fundamentally understand how the game works.
Yeah. He's not charismatic. None of these men really are charismatic.
Yeah. I think, and I don't know what the kids are calling these, but definitionally, I would say the difference between a fuckboy and a player is their intent is the same. It's a matter of skill and competency. Yeah. It's a matter of skill, competency, and charisma, right? They both are going out with the same intention and the same goal. The big fundamental difference is that the player can actually execute and on his intent with some measure of success, where the fuckboy, maybe not,
All right, let's move on to some of the women.
All right, let us start with, oh my God, it's 3 M's. We are just sticking with the M's. Madison has come up a couple of times. So give us the backstory, the comprehensive. Have we gotten more backstory on anybody?
No, Madison... Well, she has a backstory to tell, and a backstory that is very relevant in bringing her to who she is today and how we're meeting her now. She describes that she grew up in a cookie cutter town, moved to Paris, then to Jordan, and was teaching English to kids in Jordan. It's important to her that people feel safe with her, given what her upbringing was like. She describes it as rough. Her parents had her at 19. Her mom was surrounded by drugs, in rehab when she met dad. Mom got married to another guy, stepdad, who died of a drug overdose. We also learned that stepdad was an angry guy. Now there's a strained relationship between mom and Madison. And Madison's really trying to be a cycle breaker for herself, for her brother and sister, who are significantly younger. She's an artist and a painter who used to work in the corporate world. And she also lost her brother to a car accident in 2020. So she's had a lot of tragedy and potentially I don't know how she's viewing this. I'm going to assume a lot of trauma, and that definitely impacts the way that she relates to others and views herself. The thing about Madison that she talks about a little bit later on, she describes her attachment style as avoidant. I would give a little note that I think it's a little bit more disorganized than avoidant, but we can get to that.
A little note. She was screaming at the TV.
You're wrong.
So very quickly, we did do 2 episodes on attachment styles and love languages a couple seasons back of The Bachelor. We definitely should link those because, it's very clear that she doesn't really understand. She claims to understand when asked by, I believe it's Alex, right? He talks about attachment styles, and she jumps right in talking about being avoidant and gets almost everything about avoidant attachment wrong.
Well, yes, but later on, when she was talking with him about essentially when she gets really stressed and she kind of shuts down and dissociates, she was talking about giving an anecdote about when she was 17 and telling herself, like, you are a robot. Essentially, you don't have needs. You don't need to have needs, and how important it was for her to not have needs and to not need anyone other than herself. And so in that circumstance, I could see where the avoidant attachment makes sense. But in the way she was describing it as, when she is in a relationship with someone and she sees like their feelings start to change or their energy sort of switches up, then she pulls away. That is more of a disorganized attachment. And typically individuals who have had a more traumatic upbringing, like the one that Madison described, form a more disorganized attachment style because what they are used to getting from their caregiver is inconsistent. And so there is a lot of essentially touch and go, that feeling that gets carried in a relationship.
So I don't think I have anything as articulate to say about her other than she, to me, seems to be playing a lot of games, testing the guys pretty much constantly. When I see her on the screen, my impression of her is this is somebody who thinks she's better than she is and thinks she's kind of better than the people around her when she's not, right? And
harsh.
Well, I mean, I'm not saying she's not a good person. I'm not saying she's not worthy. What I'm saying is I just get the impression that she really thinks she's hot shit and she's not hot shit, right?
I don't necessarily get that from her at all. In fact, if I'm rooting for anyone, I'm rooting for her.
Really?
Out of the women, she's the one that I like the most.
You have a soft spot for trauma. That's your whole background.
But I think the thing, I don't think that she thinks she's hot shit. I think she thinks she's more self-aware than she actually is.
Okay.
And so I think that we're going to see a bit of that come out. And it seems like she's done a lot of work on herself. It seems like she has like really been on this healing journey. She does reference her relationship with sex and it's the impact of religion on her relationship with sex. And so that was also an interesting thing to watch her navigate. Again, and she believes that she is kind of healed beyond an avoidant attachment. And so all of these things, I'm bringing all of these things in after I say I don't think she's as self-aware as she thinks she is, because we see her, as you say, kind of playing some of these games, which indicate that she's not as far along in her healing journey as she may think she is.
Yeah. I think from a casting job, I'm excited to see her on the season because I think she's going to give us a lot of things to talk about. That being said, I definitely don't think that she really understands what love and marriage is about. And I don't think that she's anywhere near ready. And I don't think she's really going through this process with intentionality. And so, but I think she's going to be interesting.
The verdict's still out for me on that. I guess we'll see what happens in the subsequent episodes. But I believe that she believes everything that she's saying.
Okay.
And that can also mean that she isn't completely ready or that she's not totally getting it right. But I believe that she believes what she's doing in what she's doing.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Who do you want to go to next?
I think we've had a couple of downers in here. Let's go to some levity. Let's talk about Megan, or I guess her full name is Margaret.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, Megan, not shorthand for Margaret.
I don't know. These are my notes for Meg. Cringy, delusional, and then goofiness is important. Being weird with someone.
Yeah, I mean,
that's what I got.
She's a flight attendant.
Oh yeah, flight attendant.
And she's a flight attendant.
Phone sex operator voice.
Yeah. Okay. One, does not have a phone sex operator voice. Two, we fly a lot. She definitely gives flight attendant vibes. Look, she is so high energy. I'm exhausted watching her on the screen. I can't imagine being on a date with her.
In
I mean,
fact, we started watching episode 1 last night, and after her date with Dave, I was like, I got to go to bed. Like it really sucked all of my energy.
yeah. Oh yeah. Um, Beyond that, I mean, look, she's kind of like a fun lunatic, right?
Yeah.
She is all over the place. I think that she thinks that she's this really intellectual, deep thinker, and really, she's just like a really curious idiot. Like
She's really into conspiracy theories.
super hard into conspiracy theories, and like she will hear this information, but she doesn't like it's very clear that she doesn't has no knowledge of like physics and some biology and some of the kind of earth sciences, because like she just will just, if somebody says something crazy, she's just going to jump right into it. And like, look, like believing that aliens exist or there's extraterrestrial life out there is not a crazy thing to believe, right? But when you start, going down every last little rabbit hole of every conspiracy theory, involving aliens, and it starts to be okay. Let's rein in a little bit, So anyway, look, I think she's fun. I think she's good for the show. I would have been out of that date with her. Like that's a coffee date. Drop the 350 on the table and get out of there as fast as possible if you're dating. But like as a show, I will say I think the casting crew did a good job here.
I can tell you don't drink coffee because the fact that you think a coffee these days is $3.50 is absurd.
Okay, wait a second here.
I just got an $8 coffee from Pura Vida.
You paid $8 for something you could make for 15 cents at home?
It was delicious.
This is why we're so poor. Think about the equipment we could have gotten, with all of that.
I work hard.
That's our producer money.
All right, who's next?
All right, last M of the day, Molly.
Okay, so Molly is 29. She has never had a serious boyfriend before. And she never needed to have a boyfriend just to have a boyfriend, because if she wanted to, she would. Mm-hmm. She references her Catholic upbringing. We hear her talk about the fact that she's Irish. We know she has an ass tat. I don't really know much else about her. At some point, there's a reference to her being a dancer, maybe a dance teacher. But she definitely leads with a lot of sex and this goofiness, and life needs to be fun, and that's what life is all about, is being fun. Mm-hmm. And that's her brand.
Yeah, look, I think she is deluded and delusional. I think she thinks that she's a 10 and a serious catch. She's neither of those things, right? She's a trashy 5. That's what she is, and that's okay. She clearly has a personality that's extraordinarily off-putting for a variety of reasons, and I get the sense that she's made a lot of life decisions that would make her unappealing to a lot of quality guys. And when she says that I haven't had a serious boyfriend because I don't want one, that might be true. But I think that her perception that she hasn't had one simply because she doesn't want one, I think that is untrue. And I think that she just lacks a tremendous amount of self-awareness. She probably has less self-awareness than anybody else on this show thus far that we've seen.
It'll be interesting to watch this play out. I mean, I'll save that for when we get to the relationships.
Yep.
Okay, finally.
Lauren. I got a lot to say about Lauren, but start us off with her history, background.
Yes, so she's 30 years old. She is currently a social studies curriculum salesperson. She used to be a teacher, but didn't earn a livable wage, so she pivoted careers. And one thing that I wrote down for her from her intro, she said, the greatest thing a father can do for their children is love their mother. And I thought that was a nice sentiment.
That was definitely the highlight moment for her. I 100% agree with it. And I think it was probably in the top 2 or 3 most, kind of important or impactful things that have been said in the first 3 episodes from any of the cast members. What I will say is that was her high point, and it's been pretty much downhill from there with Lauren. Part
of her narrative seems to be people think I'm just this nice girl, but there's more to me than that. I'm I like going out. I like having fun. I have a lot of friends. And so that's been interesting to see play out with her relationship with Dave. But that seems to be central to part of her narrative, is she's fighting against the nice girl teacher persona.
Yeah, so I'm happy that you point this out because this is the entire thing. She is actually perfect for Dave, okay? Because Dave is an asshole and he ultimately wants to walk in and see how far he can push people, right? Here's the thing about Lauren. She has no strong value system or principle system, and it's so obvious and clear. It's obvious that she's just going to adopt and evolve into whatever the people around her. Her friends want to do this, we're going to go do this. My boyfriend's going to do this, I'm going to become this. In a lot of ways, she kind of gives similar vibes to Marissa from last season, right? What I had said about Marissa was she was a woman who, she was somebody who came in and had a strong opinion about her value system every single week. And every single week, it was completely different and completely incongruent with the last thing she had said in the last episode. She clearly didn't have a strong tethering towards her own individual value system and set of principles by which she believed and wanted to live by. And it made her kind of a mess on that season. Lauren is basically a calmer version of that, really, right? A more kind of emotionally stable version of that. This girl very evidently does not actually know what she believes, doesn't know what her values are, doesn't know what her principles are, and she's sort of like banging all over the place with a bunch of different stuff. I think she needs to figure out who she is and then figure out what marriage is and then come back on the show because I think she is so far away.
I mean, good on you for having so many strong opinions. I don't really have a lot to say about her at all, and that is my opinion.
Interesting.
All right. So let's get into some of the relationships because we've already been sort of alluding to that anyway.
Yeah. Let's talk about the easy one, simple one. The only couple in the first 3 episodes to get engaged, Joey and Monica. Look at these two. They are goofy. They are high energy. They actually seem to really like each other. They're weird, both of them. I think like physically they kind of match each other in a weird sort of way. There was really no meaningful conversation. They seemed to be each other's one the whole time, or at least that's what we saw. And from the way production edited this, it felt like they got from 0 to 60 really fast. Now we don't know what happened in reality, but yeah, and their first meeting was maybe the most awkward of any that I have seen. Maybe that's not true. But it was definitely more on the awkward side. But I kind of like them, and I kind of root for them. And I think they actually might be able to get to the altar.
Yeah, I mean, what's not to like, right? Like they both seem like genuinely like happy, good people. They have a very clear shared value of family. And in the first episode, Joey talks about how he declined Division I offers to play sports in order to go to a college close to his home so that he could take care of his mom and his sister, and that he has done everything he can in order to get his mom kind of set up financially, as in addition to that, also taking out a retirement account on her behalf so that she is, kind of set up and good to go. Then we hear Monica say that she has left her job and in order to take care of her grandmother, who seems to have Alzheimer's or dementia. It wasn't.
She didn't go into it, but it seemed one of the mental memory,
some sort of memory loss. Yeah. And so like they both understand the and value the sacrifice that comes from family and serving others. And I think that's really important. You referenced shared values at the top of the episode, and these are two that appear to have shared values and also are quirky as well.
Yeah, I think it's a personality fit and it's a values fit. I mean, these two just make sense, right? So I'm all for it. I want to see what happens and where this goes. What I do want to just spend a few seconds on is it was an awkward first meeting, right? They open up the doors, they both run, they get a big hug. But we're waiting minutes before their first kiss. They're off in the side room in the champagne before they have their first kiss. She kind of steps back after a second, and she's like really keeping her own space for a little while. And he didn't rush forward or anything like that. He gave her space. I mean, what did you see there?
Listen, they seemed really jazzed to meet one another. I think it just must be so weird, So I didn't really think too much of it. She didn't seem icked out by him. Like,
she was very clear. She loved the beard, loved the hair.
I think it just must be so surreal. So I don't think this is like a Leo and whatever her name was.
Yeah.
Last season. I don't think it's anything like that. That's all. I think it's just must be so weird.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, they seemed both into it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think they're going to be fun, if nothing else. Fun, quirky, they'll make for some good TV.
Sure.
All right. So why don't we go into the Mason triangle?
Okay.
All right. So we'll start off with Megan and Mason. Okay. I don't understand anything that's going on here.
I don't get this at all.
It is weird, right?
There must be footage that we are not seeing.
Do they share any values?
Do they share anything?
Do they share any?
What are they even talking about besides a belief in conspiracy theory?
That's what they're hanging their hat on, right?
I don't know.
Have we had any conversations about values, about what life looks like after this in any meaningful way? I mean,
they're connecting sexually, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, but even that was only in this last date.
No, when they talked about Halloween costume.
Okay, fair. I guess they touch on it a little bit there. Yeah.
They also made that connection over the movie Her. Mm-hmm. That we saw Mason cringily bring up, well, in the edit back to back with Madison and Meg, in feeling like she is this perfect woman that exists only in his mind. So I don't know. I mean, they're again talking a lot about sex, and just again very superficial, unserious things.
Everybody likes a good fort, right? Everyone likes a good treehouse. Everyone likes a good pillow fort. Everyone likes to roll around with the kids to go and build, forts in the house. That is not what you're talking about on like a second date. If you have a limited span of time to figure out if you are going to marry this person, that is an insane conversation to be having. Right now, I guess you could say, well, we sort of used it to judge whether or not like we have similar family values. I mean, you are really stretching at this point if that's what the conversation is, right?
I don't get it. I truly don't get it.
Yeah. And actually, I think the force was on the first date, wasn't it?
I don't know.
It doesn't even matter. She loves talking about her Halloween costumes. Look, Halloween is my favorite day of the year. I love Halloween. I'm a huge costume Halloween dress up guy. Again, why was it so prominent? And it wasn't what I think happened here is that like these two started talking about the Halloween costumes, and then suddenly, Mason goes and starts asking other girls because he thinks it's a good conversation that sort of leads into a bit of a sexual undertone type of thing. And so suddenly then it starts like it just becomes mimetic basically, where it just starts spreading throughout the entire process,
so
right?
Stupid.
And it's just like, can we ask a real question here? And quite frankly, her costumes as a Halloween costume connoisseur, I think her costumes are mostly dumb, but that's just my opinion.
There's not really anything else that we need to talk about with Meg and Mason. There's just like
there's nothing
absolutely
there.
Nothing there.
It's all predicated on their love for weird conspiracy theories
and that they want to have sex.
Yeah,
that's it.
Yep,
with each other, it seems.
Yeah, it would seem.
But Meg has been voicing that he is her number one. She has not communicated that to him as of yet, but that's it. That's her number one. That's who she wants to get married to. That's her,
it's not just she's been very clear. He is the only one.
The only one.
She's, I believe, at this point, by end of episode 3, I don't think she said it outright, but she's implied it pretty strongly that she's not actually going on any other dates with anybody else.
Yeah.
And so
right.
Yeah, this is it. It's him or bust. And if it's him or bust, I think you want to bust out of this one.
Right. Which, I mean, segueing to Madison and Mason. Madison actually tells Mason that in their date that his other connection has said it's you or none or no one.
So quick sidebar here. I think it's really fascinating because by the end of episode 3, pretty much all the women know who their competition is. And on the men's side, nobody's talked for the most part, right? Not at least that we've seen. And so I find this really fascinating because in episode 3, we really start to see the women's insecurity and those that I would say have more of a direct approach, started approaching and addressing it with some of the men. And I find that to be really interesting in the different approaches. And so Madison's approach here was probably the worst she could have done in the situation, where she's basically testing him. She's saying and questioning him where we all know she knows the information, but she's not saying she knows it. She's seeing how he's going to respond and react as a test. And then when he sort of doesn't, he gets like a C on that question, she hits him back with another one. And she just keeps going and going and going with all these sort of test questions. And Mason, you can tell, you can feel like he knows he's being tested here. He's searching for the right answer. He doesn't want to overpromise because he's not really sure what he's going to do. And, fair enough. That's fine.
Mm-hmm.
And he doesn't want to, he's not being honest with Madison. He's trying to search for the right answer. He knows he's on the back foot. He knows he's being tested. He doesn't really like it, right? And Madison, I think you said she's not as self-aware as she thinks she is. We get a lot of talk from her about how she is secure and confident and doesn't care. Well, if you don't care and you're confident, you're not doing this testing right here.
Agree.
And so, yeah, I hated everything about the way Madison interacted,
Mm-hmm.
and I hated 85% of the way Mason handled the responses to this.
Right. Well, and I think it was a good indicator of her attachment style showing, because she has this information that someone else also has a strong connection with this person, and she's essentially pushing him away. This is, again, the edit. Maybe it's the edit. Maybe it's her actual pattern of thoughts. But these pushing questions come right after them talking about breakups, and he's saying, I never break up with anyone, and she's saying, I'm always the one to break up because I respect myself too much to deal with any sort of bullshit. And so she was inviting him to just chop her head off, just break up with me. There's someone else that is down for you, that will get married to you in a second, or get engaged to you in a second. Either break up with me or tell me how you feel. And he did neither. He couldn't either. He kept saying like some vague, and he was trying to be he was a politician here. Like, what we have is real. You mean a lot to me. We don't have a connection like anyone else, like I do with anyone else. And she's like, well, what does that mean? Like, just poking the bear.
Yeah.
And again, just essentially leave me, or I'm gonna force your hand here.
Yeah. Well, I think that the telling part of this was then she basically threw Alex in his face, right? And it's like, that is not, it's one thing to have a conversation and say, look, we're still both dating other people. I want you to know that there is one other person I'm talking with.
Right.
Ask me any questions you need to know, so we can get through this process. That is a distinctly different and more mature conversation than, well, I've got a strong connection too. How's that feel, right?
Right. Well, and she keeps saying like, your other connection doesn't bother me. Like all of this stuff about like, I don't need needs, that kind, or I don't have needs. I don't want needs. Like that's all of that posturing she was doing around like, no, like this doesn't bother me. Like, doesn't bother me to know, doesn't bother me to talk about. I have this
Seems
too.
like it.
But I think that was her defensive posture because she, as she said, she hates intense feelings. And she tends to shut down during stress. And so we see her saying, this doesn't bother me, but her actions are showing that this is a stress response that she's starting to shut down. Similar to Meg and Mason, I don't really know what Madison and Mason have to connect on, which tells me that Mason is the issue and that there's just no depth there.
He kind of reminds me, who was the semi-pro football kicker from last season?
Nick Dorka.
Kind of Nick Dorka vibes, right? A not super attractive guy who doesn't have a lot of charisma, comes off a lot better in the pods, but not a lot of depth there. And I think once you get out of the pods, and probably not used to getting a lot of attention from women. Now, so once he gets out of the pods, I think he is toast.
He's going to flounder.
Completely flounder. It totally Nick Dorka vibes.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. So for me, it doesn't seem like Madison is really that into Mason, right? Like they seem to keep it light and fun. And there is like a flirtier part of Madison that we see, a freer part of Madison, a less serious part of Madison, which I think is important to see, juxtaposed to with Alex is very serious.
So this is what I think it is. I think that she recognizes that Alex is a catch and she wants to be with Alex, but she knows deep down, whether she wants to admit it or not, she knows that Alex is not picking her. And so
you don't think Alex is picking her?
I think Alex would be a complete and utter moron to pick her.
He's really nervous to pick her.
I would be more than nervous. It should fall into fear.
So Mason feels safe.
So I think Mason is sort of like the backup safe option, right? I think she's looking at this going like, I really like Alex. Alex is the actual catch on this season, But like, Alex is not picky. He's given me enough indication that he has anxiety about picking me for a variety of reasons. And it's come across,
Right.
it's not just like one issue. He's got anxiety about picking me over 3-4 different things that we
Sure.
just don't share value in. And so let me see how far I can go with
Yeah,
Mason.
I mean, putting all of her chips in for Alex is much riskier and much more
Yeah.
vulnerable. She had said at one point in the women's quarter something like that she's kind of torn between her top two, and essentially she just needs one of them to say, it's you. And
Kind of a problem by itself statement. But
agree. And so I think
that's not
that
how love really
that
work,
there's
but.
some deep insecurity here for sure. But let's then
Transition
move
to Alex.
Yeah, Alex and Madison.
I think at this point we've talked a lot about both of them and contextualized this relationship already. Alex is asking a lot of questions. I think that he is kind of, genuinely interested in her for some reason that I can't quite put my finger on, because he keeps asking her questions. She keeps giving him answers that are not really in alignment with his values. They don't seem to their life paths seem very different. And like, I can't even picture what like an average day would be with the two of them.
I think that there's a lack of compatibility there. And much of this might be on, again, their attachment styles are like oil and vinegar. They should not mix. They are not going to work well together if they don't work on their stuff independently or together. But that's, again, Alex is asking good intentional questions and Madison is answering very honestly. And her answers are causing him to say, can I handle this? And do I want this? So you think that Alex doesn't pick her?
Look, okay, here's the problem, okay? From what we kind of see, I think this is Alex's only it's his strongest connection because it's the only one that we really see any meaningful time with. So at this point, it's either yes or it's either her or nobody, right? And if it's her or nobody, and I believe that she thinks that Alex is her number one, then I could totally see them being like, let's do the proposal. It's low risk. We get a vacation out of it. And let's
he doesn't see it as low risk. He keeps emphasizing this is a really big decision.
Yeah. I don't think, look, he is a type of guy that he's not getting married on the show, right? Like, I think that's pretty clear. He's the type of guy that can get to the altar, but is not pulling the trigger in this condensed time frame. Let me just make that prediction right now.
We'll see.
The question is whether or not he ends up even getting out of the pods, right? Can he even pull the trigger in the pods?
That's fair.
Right? I think that he could talk himself into pulling the trigger in the pods, because there is it ultimately, until you say yes at the altar, you always have a back door, and it is relatively low risk. So I could see him getting there. I do think that Madison picks him if it really comes down to between her and Mason. But also, I think that Madison is in a really awkward spot here because the guy she wants has a lot of ambivalence towards her, and the guy that's her backup is not indicating to her she's feeling like she's his number two. So I think Madison is just in an awkward spot here, where she could easily go home with nobody, especially after the conversation she has with Mason,
right,
where she sets Mason on a back foot. Mason's now thinking, okay, like, I might have to be dealing with that level of insecurity and that testing all the time. I'm going to lean into my other girl because of that.
Could be. As we're talking, I feel the need to say, please no spoilers in the comments. We haven't watched episodes 3 through 6, and I don't know by the time that this gets posted, we will have. So please keep the comments spoiler free. Keep commenting, but keep the comments spoiler free. All right, let's.
Also, I want to know how many of you watching also follow our Bachelor podcast, and how many of you just here for Love Is Blind? I'd be really interested to know that.
Yeah, we're doing a little experiment with the future of our show. All right, let's go to the love triangle. The Dave triangle. Why any women want this man is one thing, but why
he's the Leo of this season.
Yeah,
he is a guy that has red flags galore. That on paper he seems fine, but like in person, nothing he's saying is believable. There's no charisma here or likable, and yet there's girls like
I could say for him what you said about Molly, someone who has this BDE and thinks that they're a 10 and is absolutely not. Not a catch physically, not a catch in anything that he shared, not a catch at all.
He scored a 6 on an exam. 6. Season of idiots. Yeah, I 100% agree with you. So he's basically got two connections, right? Molly and Lauren.
Two very different connections.
Very different.
He's trying to force them both sexual.
The Molly one is just naturally
just there,
it's been there from state one. Yep, exactly.
They both, they talk a bit about their Catholic upbringing as like something that's a little bit serious, but they really just connect on let's be fun, let's be silly. That's what life is about. Sure, there's going to be ups and downs, but why don't we just keep the downs fun and we'll be fine. Like that's their big thesis statement.
They were talking, right? I think it was date 2. The entire date that we saw was them talking about how they're going to spend their time apart from one another and how they don't want to come home and see the other person, on the other side of the door. And I'm just like, never, like, look, everyone can and can aspire to different types of relationships and everyone has different arrangements and that is perfectly fine. But I would say one of the single most important things to me about marriage is one of the biggest joys in our marriage is when I come home and I open that door and I see you on the other side. This past year, you've had to travel a lot back and forth to Miami. I've had to stay a lot more in Connecticut. We've never spent more time apart. In the 17 years we've been together, we've never spent this kind of time apart. And it is extraordinarily hard because part of our marriage is about that time together. And even though we talk every day and stuff, it's not the same, right? And I just can't fathom in my mind somebody who's going into a conversation about marriage starting with, I don't really want you home all the time. Go have your fun. I want my alone time too. It's like, alone time.
Have independent lives, independent interests. That's
important. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But if that's what you're leading with, I think that's a huge red flag.
Right. I agree.
And that could be my bias, right? That could be my bias, but
they just don't really seem to have. Again, I feel like I've said it this entire episode. Like another couple that seems to have like nothing of substance that they've connected on, no real strong foundation. It's just ugh. And then we get to Lauren and Dave, and it feels like he's just trying to force it with Lauren.
Because she's a manipulative, she's a manipulatable pushover, and he knows that he can just.
Well, I think she's probably like, okay, this is who I should be with. This good girl teacher type. If I'm trying to break out of this, I'm only into women for how they look. This woman would give me the integrity that I'm trying to build. Like this, I think it's that. I think it's more about like the should of who I should be with. But I don't really think. I think he wants to want her. I don't think that he actually does.
We have very different takes on this. I mean, for one, I know he doesn't know what they look like, but Lauren is significantly more attractive than Molly.
Yeah.
That being said, I also think that he looks at Lauren as this is a girl who, sure, will give me cred as going with the nice girl, but the thing that makes her appealing to a guy like Dave
doesn't have a strong personality like Molly.
Oh yeah, he knows that he can manipulate her into being whoever he needs it. She will be molded into whatever he wants her to be, and that for a guy like Dave is probably going to be very appealing, right?
Interesting.
And so Molly, he's going to get the short-term gratification of having potentially a wild sexual fling with her, but the reality is that that will ultimately get boring, right? And it, with Lauren, it might get boring, but he can constantly just keep remolding her and keep pushing her into whatever he wants her to be, right? So I think that there's a lot of reasons why he is supposed to pick Lauren here. I think Lauren is a fool for accepting, but
Yeah, I guess we will see what happens.
So there's still a whole bunch of other cast members. There's a whole bunch of other kind of couples going around. These were definitely the couples that made the strongest impression, and we got most the screen time. So hopefully we start seeing some of the dynamics in some of the other couples. But is there anybody in particular of the couples we didn't mention today that you're looking forward to seeing?
Well, it feels like there's definitely going to be some drama in the Devin, Virginia, Brittany dynamic. And then we also have that other relationship where they, again, don't have shared values, but somehow seem to be plugging forward, Sarah and Ben. So
That's weird. That came out of nowhere. We had never seen Sarah or Ben, and suddenly they're on.
I imagine we're going to see them more in the next. Yeah. She's like the cover photo for this season. So that I don't know what that might mean, but we still have a lot more pod to go.
Yep.
So I'm interested to see that a bit more.
So my prediction on the Devin, Virginia, Brittany triangle right now is I think that this is the opening sort of like narration that we got. I think that Devin ends up picking Virginia, and this is Virginia narrating the opening. And
he knew exactly who I looked like. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
they went to the same high school.
They went to the same high school. They were only 5 years apart. Also the voice, I didn't go back and rewatch it, but the voice kind of seems to match. And there's something about Devin's vibe that leads me to believe that I could believe this about him. I could believe it about a couple of the guys, but like it feels believable to me about Devin. So I'm interested to see how that evolves, but that's my prediction at this point. So I'm interested in that. I'm hoping we get more of that evolution of them in episodes 4 to 6.
Yeah, I can't imagine that we won't. So yeah, we'll be back with the conclusion of the pods, episodes 4 through 6. So make sure you stay tuned for that. If you are not already a subscriber, hit the subscribe button and also the like button at the bottom of this video so that you can stay up to date with all the new content that we are going to be bringing your way. Next week's going to be a content dump between The Bachelor, episode 4, these episodes of Love is Blind. So we got a lot coming our way.
3 episodes. We never delivered. No, that's not true. One other time we delivered 3 episodes in 1 week for you all.
Yeah, we're here for you. We're churning it out. All right. So keep active in the comments. Thank you for being there. We love having you as part of our community. Yeah, stay tuned for more. We'll be back soon. See you later. Bye.
See ya.